Hello, everyone, and happy Earth Day. I am Laurie Anderson, Colorado Field Organizer from Moms Clean Air Force, and I am going to be your host today. Our Colorado and New Mexico teams have partnered up for a fantastic event with our organizers, kids, and members of Congress. Let's kick off this event with a welcome from our organizers, starting with Celerah Hewes from Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Thank you, Laurie. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm Celerah Hewes, and I'm the Moms Clean Air Force representative from New Mexico. I grew up in Corrales, and now I live in Albuquerque with my daughter. We see climate change every day in New Mexico, from changing weather patterns, drought, and rising heat, but we also see environmental factors across the state, like ozone and methane pollution, that impact the health of our families. I've been proud to stand with families taking action at every level, from city council meetings to the state legislature and meeting our federal representatives to testifying in front of the Environmental Protection Agency to demand that we do better at equitable protection for our kids. I'm glad to be here today with our neighbors in Colorado to talk about ways that we can continue to make a difference. And now I'll hand it off to Shaina Oliver from Denver, Colorado.
Thank you, Celerah, and everyone. I am Shaina Oliver, Field Organizer for Equal Madres Moms Clean Air Force Colorado chapter, and an advocate for Indigenous peoples' rights. Most importantly, I am a mother of 4, and we are the descendants of the genocide known as the Indian Removal Act, known to the Diné as the Long Walk of the Navajo. Originally born in Shiprock, New Mexico, where my grandfather's family resided after the Long Walk. Environmental violence has had an historical impact on Indigenous communities, as well as these impacts continue outside of reservations where Black, Indigenous, Latino, and low-income communities are likely to be near high traffic zones, Superfund sites, waste sites, plants, and oil and gas sites. I represent these communities in our fight for our children's right to breathe and play in a safe environment and protecting the next 7 generations' right to clean air, water, and land.
This Earth Day, my floormates and I are celebrating by walking around our town and picking up trash. Earth Day is about pausing to remember our daily commitment to treating the earth with better respect, especially in the little day-to-day habits. For me, this means forgoing most heavily packaged foods and items, appreciating the closeness of a small town by walking instead of driving when I need to go somewhere, and using less water and electricity. Let's continue to seek out opportunities to be more environmentally cautious in the little things, remembering that it all adds up. Thank you for your commitment to respecting the earth this Earth Day.
It is my pleasure to be joined today by Representative Teresa Leger-Fernandez of New Mexico's 3rd Congressional District. The Congresswoman is a 17th generation Northern New Mexican who grew up as part of a large rural ranching and farming community. Before coming to Congress, Leger-Fernandez worked as an attorney and advocate and won important legal battles to advance voting rights, promote tribal sovereignty, and protect our environment and acequia waters. Last November, she became the first woman elected to this congressional district. Welcome.
Thank you, Celerah, and thank you, Moms Clean Air Force. I love the title. I love the name of the organization and what you do. Thank you so much for inviting me to this conversation. And on Earth Day, such a beautiful reason to celebrate our Mother Earth. So I really enjoy serving my beautiful and beautifully diverse 3rd Congressional District because, in New Mexico, we share this deep, deep respect for our land, our air, and our waters. And we know that our state is actually also at the ground zero for the bold climate action that we need to do to protect our beautiful place we call home, but also that we must also protect those communities that have helped fuel America's progress and make sure that they are not left behind. And that is something that I will be doing in each of the committees I get to serve in, which is Education and Labor, House Administration, House Committee on Natural Resources. So people might say, well, what does House Administration have to do with the environment? And precisely this, we have jurisdiction over federal elections and HR 1. And we know that if we don't protect our democracy, we're not gonna be able to protect our planet. House Natural Resources is where we're gonna do some important work on, using our public lands to be the vehicle by which we transition from a fossil fuel environment to clean energy and a place where we can enjoy our beautiful, beautiful landscapes. And then, of course, in ed and labor, sometimes we don't think about the big role that we need our education system to play in terms of educating our future workforce and assisting with the transition of our workforce from working in the fossil fuel industry to working in a diversified economy, and that whether that be in direct investment into research and development or in apprenticeships programs. So there's a lot that we're going to be taking on in Congress this session to address all the needs we have. And I'm very happy that we also have a president who is putting this at the forefront.
Well, moms are very excited to work with you on a lot of those issues. So thank you so much. You recently introduced the Orphan Well Cleanup and Jobs Act of 2021, which would plug abandoned oil and gas wells that have no owner and have been leaking and polluting our communities for decades, many in rural communities. This bill also addresses climate warming methane pollution from these wells. Can you tell us why this bill is important to New Mexico and how you plan to protect communities from oil and gas pollution moving forward?
So this bill is really important because we have about 700 orphaned wells in New Mexico. And then we have countless more which are unidentified and sitting idle and, risk being orphaned and abandoned. And when we talk about what an orphan well is, that's a well where, it's no longer producing and it's just sitting there and we cannot identify an owner that we can hold liable. Under federal law, oil and gas producers have an obligation to clean up after themselves. They have an obligation to plug the wells and to remediate the site. Unfortunately, what's happened is you end up having a lot of what they call stripper wells, where a reliable company, a big company might sell it to a smaller company, and then all of a sudden there is no company left holding the bag, and so they get abandoned. You go to those sites. If you live in New Mexico, you might go to those sites. You smell the methane. You literally can smell it on your tongue. You can taste it, the metal taste in your mouth. And we need to clean them up. And so what we have is we've put $8 billion towards cleaning up the wells, but also importantly said, for those oil and gas companies that are still producing, we want to make sure you live up to your obligation to clean up the wells. So we are increasing the bonding for those wells from $10,000, which is inadequate. It's the same as it was, 30, 40, 50 years ago. So we're increasing the bonding so there is enough money set aside to actually clean up the wells. There's a lot of other methane cleanup bills that I'm going to be part of that other members are taking the lead. Congresswoman DeGette of Colorado, she has her Methane Waste Prevention Act. And then we have Community Input and Public Protections in Oil and Gas Leasing Act with Congressman Levin of California. So there's a lot of work being done right now in Natural Resources Committee that's going to focus on the fact that we need to be cleaning up even as we transition to a greener, cleaner energy portfolio.
Oh, that's fantastic. I really appreciate that. Moms Clean Air Force recently released a resource with the National Tribal Air Association, and it highlights the impacts that air pollution has on Indigenous people's health and the environment. And having seen the impact of COVID-19 over the last year, what do you think can be done to improve air quality and public health specifically for Indigenous people?
Right. I mean, another example is northern New Mexico, right? In the Four Corners area, where we have much higher rates of asthma than other parts of the country because of our coal-fired plants and because of this methane that's leaking and other hazards. And when you think about it, the pandemic COVID was a respiratory illness. So those who are already suffering from damage done to your lungs are going to be more vulnerable. And so we need to just start cleaning up the air, right? Clean air, moms, clean air for us. And that's what we're going to be doing. I think the closure, as we move to close coal-fired plants will be a big thing. We must also make sure that our Native American tribes and communities are at the table when we discuss these issues, because there are lots of competing factors that need to be considered, and we need to listen to their voices. We need to listen to their voices about what does it mean to be a true steward of the land, because they bring a lot of that indigenous wisdom. I worked for 30 years. I was so fortunate to work with Native American tribes and their entities, and to learn about a different perspective that they bring, which really is a beautiful perspective. It's kind of all-encompassing, outward concentric circles to say we must care for everybody, not just our own community and or our own state or our own nation, but it's really truly the planet, and it is all those things that live on that planet. And so that's the indigenous wisdom that we need to bring in to our thinking. And then there are some great bills that will be pushing for that. There's our votes, including the Environmental Justice for All Act, which will elevate all voices in this process.
Oh, that's wonderful. The idea that we're all in this together, I think, is something that we can really understand and that we try to pass on to our children as well. Across the country, communities of color we're seeing being disproportionately burdened by environmental and climate impacts. And this is especially true in those parts of northern or northwestern New Mexico where oil and gas pollution, drought, and extreme heat are of concern. How do these communities get involved and take action to protect their health? And how will you ensure that they are listened to and that they have that active role in decision making or bringing them to the table, as you mentioned?
Yes. What I love is that the communities are active and involved. I get lots of correspondence regarding the different issues, from the Sunrise movements to, the Native American women who are leading the charge on many of these issues. We are listening, and we want to make sure that we continue to listen. So, getting involved, reaching out to me, go to my website, fernandez.house.gov. Sign up for my newsletter so I can tell you what I'm doing, and then you can let me know what's important. I am chair of the Indigenous Peoples Subcommittee and Natural Resources, and we are having hearings, both legislative hearings and oversight hearings. Like, we're going to have a legislative hearing on infrastructure, and when we talk about that infrastructure in a few days, it's going to be not just what we have now, but what we need to have so that we can have that transition. Your organization, right? Like, get involved in moms, because that is all encompassing, right? It's about taking care of our children. And so I encourage everybody to get involved in whatever is their organization of choice. Right there, Yucca, I love Yucca. Yucca has some amazing young people who are Dene and Native American and Chicano and Latino and Latinx, right? Whatever it is, the term you want to use, they are pushing the envelope and they're keeping us accountable. And that's really important for people to say, Teresa, what are you doing on this? Even though I'm going to be a champion, push me on it so that I can remember. And so then when I go and testify or bring a bill, I can say, this is what my community wants. This is what they need. And I need to be responsive. So keep all of us honest and on task.
Thank you so much for all of that. That's really great advice for a lot of our families. And I just want to thank you for your time today. Moms around New Mexico look forward to working with you, and we hope you have a lovely Earth Day. Do you have any special plans?
You know what? I'm working.
That's a great way to
working. So my special plans for Earth Day are to keep working here in Congress to promote our agenda to actually protect this beautiful place we call home.
Oh, well, that's a fantastic thing to do. So thank you so much again for your time today, and have a wonderful Earth Day.
Okay, thank you.
This year, I'm fighting for Earth Day because we are running out of time. Our generation and future generations will depend on the actions that are taken today. The faster we implement changes to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, like methane and other pollutants, the less damage will be done. We as youth are speaking up and letting our elected officials and leaders know that we must act now. Our generation will one day be the leaders, and we will inherit the decisions that are currently being made. We know that the time to act is now. Thank you for fighting for Earth Day.
Thank you. Today, we are honored to be joined by Representative DeGette of Colorado's 1st Congressional District for Earth Justice Day. Now in her 13th term, Representative DeGette is a leader on healthcare, women's rights, and the environment. As the chair of a key oversight panel, DeGette is responsible for overseeing some of our nation's most important federal agencies, including the Department of Health and Human Services, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Food and Drug Administration. Thank you for your work, Congresswoman.
Thank you, Shaina, and I'm so glad to be with you and all the moms today in honor of Earth Day.
We appreciate your sponsorship of the Colorado Wilderness Act, which would permanently protect more than 660,000 acres of wilderness in 36 district areas across Colorado. Why is the protection of our wilderness so important to you? And would this act limit oil and gas extraction on these protected lands?
So it's really important to me to protect the few remaining wild areas that we have in our country, areas which are undeveloped, where people can go and seek solitude. It's just very, very important to do that. And these areas, as well as being roadless, no mechanical equipment can be used. They're also protected from oil and gas development. And if we're hoping to stop climate change by having 30% of our lands managed by 2030, then we are going to simply have to protect more wilderness. That's why I introduced the Colorado Wilderness Act, and I've been fighting for it for many, many years. And now it's part of a bigger bill that I'm sponsoring called Protect America's Wilderness, which protects almost 3 million acres throughout the Western United States.
That sounds very great, and we appreciate that and your leadership. And to our next question, across the nation, there are 16 million people living within a mile of oil and gas operations that leak and vent climate warming methane and other harmful pollutants that puts their health and safety at risk. What actions are you taking to protect health and the climate from the oil and gas industry's air pollution?
So I've been working for some years now on a methane reduction bill that I've introduced in Congress. But now what's happening is the Biden administration wants to reverse this terrible methane rule that was enacted under the Trump administration. And so I will be the House sponsor, along with some of my colleagues in the Senate, of a bill to reverse that very devastating action and to regulate methane that comes out from oil and gas drilling. Methane is a very, very serious chemical that can impact people's health. And as you say, Shaina, particularly in areas where we have environmental justice needs and concerns, where we have a lot of people who are adversely affected. So we're hoping we can pass this bill because we've already been able to pass legislation in the House to regulate methane. And now under this procedure, it only takes 51 votes in the Senate to pass it. And so we're hoping to do that by the end of May.
That sounds very great, and I appreciate your stewardship in that. And we'll go to our final question. You represent the 1st District of Colorado that includes Globeville, Elyria, Swansea, who are disproportionately impacted by pollution sources, including congested highways and the Suncor refinery. What are you doing to protect these communities from harmful air pollution and climate change? And how do you approach environmental justice issues to ensure that most impacted communities have a voice and a power in pollution protection?
So I've been very concerned for a long time about environmental justice in the neighborhoods of Globeville, Elyria, and Swansea. These are wonderful communities in my congressional district that have hardworking families in them, and they have been disproportionately impacted by a highway going through, by their proximity to all of the factories and industrial plants in Brighton, and have really, really suffered the consequences in terms of the health of all of the citizens. So one thing I have done, I've been working very, very hard to get Suncor to comply with appropriate environmental standards in their hydrogen cyanide emissions. And to that end, in the last Congress, I introduced legislation, which I'm getting ready to introduce again in this Congress, to regulate hydrogen cyanide emissions. What happened was Suncor was able to just basically set its own standard for emissions, even though it was harming the health of the neighbors there. And there have been independent studies that have shown we need to regulate these emissions. So I've also worked very hard with the governor and with others, the other members of the congressional delegation, to try to get appropriate environmental regulations on Suncor. Also, I want to let you know that that I have a bill for environmental justice. And what it does, it requires the Environmental Protection Agency to identify 100 communities nationwide which suffer a disproportionately high number of environmental violations, which I think would be clear with these neighborhoods we're talking about here, and to work with state environmental agencies to figure out how we're going to be able to deal with the enforcement of environmental law in these communities. I was really pleased because we had a hearing in the Energy and Commerce Committee last week on my bill, as well as several other bills, the Environmental Justice for All Act by Congressman Grijalva and McEachin and others. And I'm hoping that our bills will be marked up for a vote and that they can pass the House and pass the Senate. We really need to focus on these very vulnerable communities to make sure we protect the health of all of our citizens.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for speaking with us today. Colorado moms look forward to continuing to work with you, and we hope to have a wonderful Earth Day.
Thank you so much, Shaina, and thank you and all of the moms for your hard work to protect the land and the water and the air for your children, for my children, and for all of the children of our state, nation, and world. It's so important. Happy Earth Day. Let's go fight for justice.
Earth justice. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Evie and I'm 8. I think we should keep fighting for Earth Day because when I grow up, I want to look outside and see all the trees and flowers and birds, blue skies. And that's why I think we should keep fighting for Earth Day. Bye. Bye.
Hi, I'm Anissa. I'm a volunteer with Defender Future. Letting you know what I'm doing for Earth Day. I'll be at the Denver State Capitol protesting Line 3, which is a pipeline going through indigenous territories in Minnesota.
Hi, I'm Ed Perlmutter, Congressman for the 7th Congressional District in Colorado, which includes Jefferson County and Adams County. Today, I am talking to you from Washington, D.C. to remind you that Earth Day is a very special day for all of us because it's a time when we remember that our actions today will determine our well-being into the future for our state, our nation, and for the world. Coloradans, we enjoy the outdoors and we are very blessed to have great public lands and a wonderful quality of life. We have the National Renewable Energy Lab, which is the finest laboratory in the world for energy efficiency and renewable energy. We've been working very hard across our state to reduce emissions and reduce our carbon footprint. And that's really the goal of all the things that the National Renewable Energy Lab does. I'm working on a piece of legislation called the Green Neighborhoods Act And the purpose of that is to reduce our carbon footprint by using energy efficiency and renewable energy measures in construction, and especially in the development of commercial, industrial, multifamily, and retail properties. So Earth Day is a great day to remember that our actions today determine our well-being tomorrow, but every day needs to be Earth Day because climate change and pollution are affecting our planet at an ever accelerating rate. And these two things, climate change and pollution, definitely affect our state and affect our communities of color in even a more disproportionate way than, other people. So Earth Day, please remember it, but every day has to be Earth Day. We got to get to work, go celebrate Earth Day, but let's do whatever we can to reduce our carbon footprint. Thanks. Take it easy.
Thank you for joining us today to celebrate Earth Day and hear from members of Congress about their work to act on climate to protect the health and future of our kids. For more information about the work Moms Clean Air Force is doing in Colorado, New Mexico, and across the country, please visit our website, www.momscleanairforce.org. You can join our mailing list, sign a petition, and learn more about this important work. We wish you and your family a great Earth Day and many more to come. Thanks for joining us.